The Philippines fails to scale upper middle income country status after coming up $26 short of the minimum threshold by the World Bank. But what does it really mean for the Philippines and Filipinos? With us now for more is JC Punongbayan, Assistant Professor at the UP School of Economics. Good to see you again, JC. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Kathy, for having me.
So we're still in the lower middle income country status in the latest World Bank assessment. We've been in this classification since the World Bank began tracking countries this way based on income since 1987. And the government's been promising upper middle income status since 2017. So what's the big deal in this round?
Well, the government is hoping that we should finally cross the threshold because we've had that category for almost 40 years, as you mentioned, and we're tantalizingly close to crossing the threshold by just $26 of GNI or gross national income per capita. However, I wouldn't put too much stock on this label because it really means little by way of implications for the ordinary Filipino. And it's much more important to focus on the key drivers of the Philippine economy because of the pandemic, for example, that pulled down the trajectory of the economy and the global headwinds that we're facing right now. Even the government has admitted that its target of previous target of 6 to 8% might not be so feasible anymore, and they downgraded their own target. So we should focus on how we could jumpstart the economy once more.
Yeah, I like the word that you used there, tantalizingly close. If we just work out the maths, because it is total national income divided by the total population. If you just work out the current population of about 150 million or so, then how gravely short is the Philippines in total national income?
Well, if you do the math, then we're still short of about $3 trillion based on the specific definition of the World Bank, which is the Atlas method, which they use to make incomes across different countries comparable. I would also would like to point out that Vietnam is actually even closer to achieving upper middle income country status. They just missed the threshold by $6 of per capita income. So they have more reason to be tantalized.
Right. In fact, as you can see here in this graph, just to be fair, it's the closest we've been to upper middle income country status at just $26 off the minimum threshold. Previous years in the Philippines was triple digits short. What do you make of this narrowing gap as we're looking at Vietnam as the next best competitor for upper middle income status?
Well, we should give credit to our own country because even if we kind of keep missing the threshold, per capita incomes in the Philippines have been increasing, definitely. But the problem is the threshold is also moving over time because of the World Bank's idiosyncratic definitions or methodologies. So at the same time that our income is increasing, the threshold has also been increasing. But so again, I would like to emphasize that maybe we should focus on our attention on how we can jumpstart the economy and accelerate growth. Because before the pandemic, I note that it was quite easy. And in fact, most people expected the economy to achieve at least 6% growth year in, year out. However, that's become a lot harder these days. Because the pandemic definitely pulled down the economic trajectory of the Philippines. In fact, if the government wishes to go back to the pre-pandemic trajectory, I did the math on this, and we'll need growth of at least 10% per year, which now looks definitely impossible. So we seem to have moved on to this new and lower growth trajectory.
And our other competitors in the ASEAN have moved forward. We could have been rubbing elbows by now with the likes of Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia. Just take a look at that chart. I know it's a little bit busy there, but just take a look at the red line. That's the Philippines. And we're right at the lower level of the part where upper middle income club in the ASEAN begins. But we're not. Why not, you think?
Well, this goes to a bigger discussion of how the Philippine economy has underdeveloped in the region since the 70s as well as the 80s. We had the crisis in the mid-80s, and then more recently we had the pandemic. So there were definitely a lot of missed opportunities over the past decades. But if you go back even further in time, you will see that the Philippines actually used to lead the pack. So we were one of the richest countries in the region. In fact, even richer than Malaysia back in the 1950s. But they overtook us since the 60s and the 70s and so on. We need to look for those growth drivers, whatever they may be, and focus our attention on how we can accelerate growth in those sectors.
Maybe we can look towards Vietnam. Our neighbors' master class in teaching us lessons. If we just tease out the purple line here and represent the graph again, and see that Vietnam, which is just $6 away from upper middle income status, as you mentioned earlier, just see that steep trajectory up. That's the purple line there, and that's Vietnam. Compare that with the red line, which represents the Philippines. So what can we learn from Vietnam? As it's practically, as you said in the column, it achieved in half the time what the Philippines has been aspiring for nearly 40 years.
Yes, Vietnam has been a rising star in the region, and despite being a socialist economy, actually they're very market oriented, and I think that's one of the reasons for their accelerated growth. They have been quite liberal, for example, in terms of attracting investments. Now, Apple as well as Samsung and other big companies have chosen to locate in Vietnam in a way that the Philippines is kind of struggling to attract these big investments in the region. And then at the same time, Vietnam has been an export powerhouse. They're quite strong in electronics, electronic products. For example, they can produce entire laptops, entire smartphones, even electric vehicles in a way that we can't. Their liberal attitude toward investments has been a key driver of their growth. And I wish we could emulate the same here in the Philippines. However, there are several restrictions that remain beyond the legal restrictions. In fact, if you just look at our laws, we're quite liberal, actually. But what's turning off investors would be other things. For example, high taxes, for example, high cost of power, the weak rule of law. So we need to fix these things so that we can begin to achieve or emulate some of the success of Vietnam.
Yeah, but we wouldn't want to emulate Vietnam and catching the ire of Trump. Trump last week claimed that he's made a deal with Vietnam and that he intends to impose a steep 20% tariff on things that Vietnam sells to the U.S. It's quite a big improvement from 46%, but where does that put us then at, let's say we finish up with 17%?
Well, yes, definitely that's a red flag in terms of Vietnam's growth. Some people think that there may be some trade that may be diverted toward the Philippines as investors, for example, investors look for countries they can locate into that are not so much exposed to Trump's tariffs. However, again, that goes back to the original point, which is the Philippine economy attractive enough? Even notwithstanding the tariffs that Trump is imposing on many ASEAN economies that over the past several years have exported a lot of goods to the U.S. And in fact, when you look at the list of countries ranked by the tariff rates that Trump wishes to impose on them, ASEAN actually figures very highly on that list. So in a way, our underdeveloped economy, as well as our lower exposure to trade with the U.S., has kind of shielded us from Trump's ire, from the worst of Trump's ire. But that's not saying so much. In fact, I would say that Trump's targeting of Vietnam is a reflection of their success. And I mean, that's a credit to Vietnam's economic development over the past decades.
So our policymakers have a lot of homework to do after your column, but thank you so much, Professor. Really appreciate the insights. JC Punongbayan of the UP School of Economics.